Lovely. Yes. Good out. I have some visual cues for you to provide some triggers, and I would like to read you some scary stories from Reddit to hopefully take your mind off the daily stresses and worries. So, I'm going to begin now. This is called I Was Taken to a Prison Run by Demons. They were gritty by elusive rules. I've been in and out of prisons and jails ever since I was 17. I thought I had seen it all. Aryan Brotherhood members stabbing guards, gang wars, escapes, and torture. I saw many things that still give me nightmares to this day. McDonald, 402202, the guard barked out. I jumped up, the thin mattress under me exhaling a whiff of stale air. I looked through the bars, seeing Correctional Officer Shea. CO. Shea was a morbidly obese man with a penchant for being loud and lazy. I had seen a member of the Bloods punch him straight in the nose before, a scene I still remembered with some humor. Shea crumpled like wet paper on the floor, screaming and crying as more COs ran over and tackled the inmate. Yeah, I asked Shea. Shea handed me a sheet of paper. He regarded me with his gray colorless eyes. Congratulations, you're being transferred. Pack your shit. This is your last day at Springfield Correctional Center. You might think I'd be happy to get a transfer. The SCC was, after all, a shithole. The food was terrible and always cold. The place always smelled like bleach and chemicals, and at night it got so cold, only my flimsy sheet that I regularly woke up shivering. The building was nearly a century old, and the fact that it still functioned at all was a miracle in itself. But to be honest, I was not thrilled about the transfer. I had made friends here and knew the lay of the land. I didn't have to worry about getting jumped or stabbed to death in the showers. As the old adage goes, it's better the devil you know than when you don't. I was let out of my cell the next evening with all the worldly possessions I owned, which fit neatly into a clear trash bag with room to spare. I owned some prison clothes, toothpaste, a toothbrush, deodorant, a Bible, a pair of sandals, and a radio. I felt the unbearable lightness of my existence reflected in that bag as it smacked rhythmically against my leg. Good luck, friend Josh, for the insane acquaintance of mine named Alvin called out from the cell as I passed down the bleak concrete hallway. Take care, man. I hope we meet again on the outside, I said, waving, knowing I would almost certainly never see any of these people again, till I hadn't even seen my family in over 5 years. None of them came to visit me anymore. No one wrote me letters or put money in my commissary account or sent me books to read. Well, we're all born alone, and we all die alone, I thought to myself as C.O. Shea walked by my side. He was breathing heavily, as if he had just finished running a marathon. I looked over his face, seeing the fresh capillaries on his nose from years of hard drinking and the squint of his little piggy eyes. There was a slight gleam of intelligence and slyness about the ugly mug, though. Well, amigo, Shea said in a slow, plodding way, I got signed to go with you. I'll be your right along, buddy. You excited or what? I smiled faintly at him. There are worse people than you, Shea said. Far worse. I got on the prison bus in my bright orange jumpsuit. To my surprise, I saw the back was nearly empty. There was only one other prisoner in the back. Shea sat with us to monitor us. We were also handcuffed and ankle-cuffed. Chain ran down and connected the two. I looked over at the other prisoner, a black guy with a shaved head. I think he also shaved his eyebrows at me. I literally didn't see a single hair on his head, besides the eyelashes, which he apparently hadn't found out would have shaved yet. Sup, he said. I nodded. Sup. He sat there in awkward silence. as Shay plopped down hard on the bench between us. He groaned like a confused old man. So what do you know about this place, Shay? I asked. He set down half a bottle of Coke and then heaved a deep sigh. I don't know much about it, to be frank, he admitted sheepishly. They're apparently brand new, though. They asked us to send a couple of people who met certain criteria. What does that mean, the black guy asked. Shay gave him a serious look. Come on, Timmy. You know what I mean. Hardened criminals. People with long records who tour prisons like some people tour French beaches. I scoffed. There are far worse people than me in prison, I said. Well, they asked for no murderers or gangbangers, too. I don't know why, but maybe it's some new government program. They apparently call it an experimental prison. What about me? Timmy asked. Shay apparently knew what he meant. You're not a murderer, Timmy, Shay said, his lips forming the faintest twitch of a smile. You never. Well, there was that time my girlfriend got me to drop acid with her. She went and killed her parents. Then we hit the road, Timmy said finally, his eyes rising as if he were looking at a hovering angel in far distance. You were never convicted of any accessory charges, so it doesn't count, Shay retorted. Oh, it counts, Timmy drawled in his slow, plodding way. It counts. Everything in life counts. If I've learned anything in the last 36 years, it's that you can never truly escape anything you've done, good or bad. I couldn't see much from the prison van. There was a small, shatterproof window in the swinging back doors, but it only gave a fleeting view of what was behind us. I noticed the dark forest stretching out to the horizon over rolling hills. We drove for a few hours. The three of us had bullshitted talking about everything from sports to politics to the recent spate of fatal stabbings in SCC. I felt the van stop. I looked out the back window, seeing more endless trees. I didn't see a single house or a car on the road we had taken. This place is a ghost town, I said. Shay nodded. Yeah, it's dead as Frank Sinatra around here, Shay said, wheezing out a high-pitched laugh at his own joke. This area used to be big for coal mining, but as it dried up and people lost their jobs, they moved away. You know, my grandfather was a coal miner. Good place to build a prison, huh? Timmy asked. If there was no one around, we were cut off by a clanging alarm up ahead. I heard something large moving, probably the gate opening. Then we were inside. I saw the guard towers and the rolls of razor wire for a brief moment as the van pulled to an open garage. The darkness immediately blanketed us. The garage door slowly rolled up, shut behind us. Shay jumped up. Let's get you boys inside so I can take off your handcuffs and everything, he said, motioning for us to follow. He pulled out a flashlight from his belt, guiding us through the pitch black. The dim light sent shadows racing across the room like groping tentacles. I caught glimpses of strange objects in the darkness. They looked like medieval torture devices. What is this place? I whispered. My voice echoed far too loudly off the cold concrete floor and walls. Those look like torture devices on the table, Shay. I think those bloody things are thumb screws, and that might be a pair of anguish. I pointed to the pear-shaped object with 3 wicked blades, whose points came together, sitting on a dusty shelf. The granite handle had springs connected to it. The object could be forced into any human orifice, and when the springs were engaged, it would open like a flower inside the person's body, ripping their flesh apart and enlarging that orifice to a bloody gaping hole. How do you know so much about this? Shay asked, giving me a strange look. He narrowed his little piggy eyes. He continued to fumble with the flashlight, peering around for a door to exit the garage. I looked back at the car and saw the driver just sitting there, his entire body as lifeless and still as a mannequin. I've read a few books, I said, as Timmy interrupted us. I see a little red light glowing under that door, Timmy said. Shay focused his flashlight on the spot across the room. I noticed what Timmy was pointing at. It was an ancient-looking black door. The wood had started to crack and splinter down the middle. Engraved in silver on the front, it said, Entrance to North Cross Penitentiary. Hello, Shay called toward the door as the three of us moved forward, the steel chains giving my steps a clinking rhythm. Shay reached the antique crystal doorknob. Timmy and I stood next to a dust-covered brazen bull, its bronze mouth wide open as if it was silently roaring at us. As Shay pulled open the door, crimson light flooded into the garage. Tinted black glass covered the black wall. A speaker button sat next to the window. I looked to my right, seeing a massive sign sprawled across the wall there it read, Rules for Personal Conduct at North Frost. COs without faces don't work here, and we don't know who they are. If you see one, press the one of the buttons labeled Emergency Dispatch that are scattered around the complex. When the red emergency lights come on, hide until they shut off. Do not go to the medical ward for any reason. The warden runs prison every night at 3:33 a.m. looking for human meat. Don't let him catch you. What is this, a goddamn joke? Timmy asked, his dark face forming into a scowl. Oh, well. Shay rubbed the back of his neck, looking like an obese little boy who lost his parents. I've never been here before, but this is all pretty unusual, I'll admit. A buzzing came from the back room, and suddenly a garish, echoing intercom turned on. Please remove their chains and direct them through the door on the left. A female robotic voice said calmly in a tone as cool as lemonade on a hot day. The transfer will be complete. Shay sighed in relief. Good, he grunted. This place gives me the creeps. Bro, you can't leave us here, Timmy protested. What the fuck is this place? Where is everyone? Why is there a room full of bloody ancient torch devices next to the garage? Shay put up his hands. I'm sorry, son, but I have orders. I'm just a messenger here. I was told to transfer you here, and that's what I've done. He fumbled around his belt for his key ring. He came over and unlocked the handcuffs and ankle cuffs from both of us. I stretched rubbed my wrist. I was glad to be cut off those suffocating restraints. Thanks for everything, then, I said, picking up my extremely light garbage bag of possessions and heading for the door on the left. Timmy reluctantly followed behind. A sign on the store read, Degenerate Population. But when we got to the other side, and it slammed shut behind us, I found a hallway filled with more red emergency lights streaming down, and an involuntary shiver ran down my body. I remembered those absurd rules someone had put up. What had it said about red lights? My mind raced for a few moments. Nance protocol said to hide. A man shrieked up ahead, his voice fretted with agony and terror. The hallway split to the right and left, and I couldn't see anyone. Timmy and I stopped. Dude, screw this, Timmy said, turning and running back toward the door we had come through. I tried pulling it open, but it was firmly locked. The scream came again, louder and closer, but this time it was cut off. Suddenly, I heard someone gurgling like a man with a split throat, trying to breathe. Then everything went deathly silent again. The gray concrete floor of the hallway had arrows pointing forward on it. There were no doors here. There was nowhere to hide that I could see. Timmy and I had reluctantly went forward. As we got to the intersection, we saw the dead body of a man in a brown khaki uniform. His lightless eyes remained open. I stared up at the ceiling, glassy and still, filled with horror. Deep gouge marks bit deeply into the flesh on his back and arms and chest. His throat had been cut or bit open as well. A spreading puddle of blood encircled his body. I saw a dark blur at the end of the hallway on the right. It looked like little more than a shadow. I whispered to Timmy, pointing. We decided to go left immediately. My heart was pounding at this point. I felt like a soldier walking through the no man's land of a war zone. I expected the attack to come at any moment. The hallway to the left had some doors. I sprinted forward as quietly as I could, with Timmy close by my side. I read the first door. To medical ward. No. I whispered, going to the second one. I heard light footsteps behind me. Turning, I saw a creature from a nightmare sneaking up on us in the bloody glow of the emergency lights. Its skin was black and shiny like that of a centipede's. In its gender form, it reminded me of the hairless werewolf. towered over us, its eyes like bone-white cataracts, its claws long and sharp as a dagger, yet its face seemed almost reptilian. It had two small nose holes, like a snake, and a jaw that unhinged and dropped far below its head. I saw rows of blood-soaked fangs. It gave off a low gurgling growl that emanated from its chest. With a rush of adrenaline and a sense of mortal terror, I pushed through the second door without reading the sign on the front. Timmy was right behind me. I heard him scream as he fell into me. I found myself in a prison dormitory, and we weren't alone. As I hit the ground, I saw a white face peering out at me from behind the bunk bed. The men hiding there saw the abomination behind us and got up, screaming and running away. The creature growled, giving chase. In two powerful bounds, it rushed across the dormitory and grabbed the man by the neck. I looked back at Timmy, seeing him groaning on the ground. Blood poured from deep cuts on his back. I grabbed him, pulling him up. Let's go. No time, I said, when I was cut off by the sound of a neck snapping. I looked back, seeing the creature had twisted the man's head around in a circle. It raised the limp body to its massive mouth and severed the head in a simple, powerful bite. Get me out of here, man, please, Timmy whispered as I pulled him back out into the hallway. I looked over, seeing another werewolf creature bounding down the hallway, chasing a man in a prison jumpsuit. I had no choice. I pulled Timmy toward the door led to the medical ward. With a creak of rusted hinges, it opened. We went inside to hide. Maybe there's something in here we can use to bandage you up, I said to Timmy, pulling him down the short hallway toward a room filled with single beds. I didn't know why the rules said to avoid this place. It looked totally empty. Against the back wall, I saw a glass cabinet filled with bandages, rubbing alcohol, band-aids, and other various first aid supplies. I ran toward it. Timmy limped along after me, still groaning. God damn, I think those claws went down to the bone, he said. It's going to be okay, as I said. I pulled out some antiseptic and bandages, adding, it could have been a lot worse. The universe would immediately prove me right. I heard a slight giggling from under one of the beds. Timmy and I both froze. Two rotted hands reached out, dragging the mutilated body of a little girl behind them. She had patches of garish black stitches running across her face, hands and arms. Dark clotted blood dripped from the sides. She wore a gore-smeared hospital gown and had no eyes. I looked into the empty sockets. They stared back at me like two black holes spinning in the void. As she rose, her giggles became full-blown laughter, hysterical gurgling like the laugh of a dying person. Then she ran at me. I saw the silver gleam of a scalpel in her little hand. No, I screamed, raising my hands to protect myself. The scalpel came down, sliced and across my palm. It cut deeply. A cold, burning pain ran up my arm. I repressed the urge to scream. At that moment, the red emergency lights flicked off. Bright fluorescent lights popped on, flickering and strobing in rapid succession. Timmy read forward, tackling the undead girl, but I saw more small hands reaching out from under the beds. Hands filled with sores and squirming larvae. I could see the bones of their hands through necrotic patches eaten into their flesh. I ran for Timmy, grabbing him and hauling him up. Time to go. Now, I screamed, pulling him forward as more undead boys and girls rose up, all with sharp knives and surgical instruments grasped in their little hands. I felt a sudden pain in my leg. Looking down, I saw knives sticking out of my thigh. The empty eye sockets of the little boy's face stared up at me, grinning like a skull. I collapsed on the ground as we were surrounded. I prayed to God then, knowing we would die. I prayed that He would forgive me for all my mistakes, because I was on the fast track to the afterlife, and we would be seeing Him in a few seconds. With a sharp cry of pain, I yanked the knife out of my leg, turning it on my attacker. Then a gunshot rang out. The head of the nearest girl exploded in a shower of bone fragments and dead maggots. I looked up, seeing Shay standing at the door, his pistol raised. Come on, he screamed. Come on, you idiots. Let's go now. Timmy and I didn't need any more encouragement as Shay continued to blow apart the nearest of the undead abominations. We limped and scrambled down towards him. My leg gave a shriek of pain with every step. We got out of the medical ward, battered and bruised but still alive. Why did you come back, Shay? I asked. Through pained breath, Shay gave me a frantic look. When I got back out to the car, the driver was dead. His throat was ripped out or something. I don't know. I grabbed his keys and came back for you too. I don't know where we are, but I'm getting you out of here, he explained. I looked at him in amazement. I had never thought in my years Shay would risk his life to save some scumbag inmates. So what's the plan, Timmy asked, sweating heavily, his eyes wild and pained. How are we getting out of here without dying? Shay shrugged. The door locked behind us when we came in, I said. Unless we can break it down and get back to the car, we passed by buttons labeled emergency dispatch and are glowing red emergency signs. I wondered if we could get help somehow through them. Halt, someone cried from behind us. I looked back, seeing a man in a black correctional officer's uniform. He ran towards us, his hand on the radio hanging from his belt, but something immediately seemed off about the figure. As he got closer, I realized why. He had no face. His entire head was just smooth, white skin without hair or any signs of features. He spoke again, and the voice seemed to come from all around his body. You must report to the medical ward, the strange figure said. We don't allow injured people in the hallways. No, we're fine, Shay said, grinning. See, buddy, I work for the DOC, too. He pointed to the identification clipped to his breast pocket. The figure raised his radio to his lips. We have resistance near Dormitory 1, the fake CO said into his radio before any of us could stop him. Shay ran forward, knocking the radio from his hand. The CO instantly straightened up and whipped out his pistol, pointing it at Shay's torso. He fired, and I saw Shay's chest explode in a blossoming flower of blood. No, damn it, Timmy said, running forward. I saw a silver gleam in his hand, and I realized he had taken one of the scalpels from the undead Shay had killed in the medical ward. As the fake CO spun to point the pistol at Timmy, Timmy ran into him, stabbing the scalpel deeply into the CO's neck. They fell together with Timmy on top of the fake CO. His body weight drove the scalpel deeper into the white, featureless skin. Blood the color of soot spurted from the wound. The gun went off, the bullet missing Timmy entirely and smashing into the ceiling. The CO's gurgling death gas seemed to come from all around his body. I grabbed Timmy. Get the guns, I said. They're both dead. We need guns. He nodded, grabbing the CO's gun and taking an extra magazine from his belt. I did the same, with Shay's gun and magazine. I pressed the button labeled emergency dispatch. As more faceless men appeared far off down the corridor, then we fled as fast as we could from the hallway, but seeing as we were both in pretty bad shape, it wasn't very fast. At that point, I was just glad to be alive, though. We wandered around the prison, avoiding the faceless COs whenever we saw them patrolling the hallways. They'd radio to each other, their voices always surrounding their bodies rather than coming from their heads, which I found extremely eerie and unsettling. A couple of times, I saw men in black SWAT suits with automatic rifles gunning down the fake COs. I wondered if this was the emergency dispatch. Timmy and I avoided them as well, and we gave a wide berth anytime we heard gunfire. We passed cells with mummified corpses hanging from the ceiling. We passed dormitories where the victims of the strange werewolf-like creatures littered floors, rotting and stinking like roadkill. Occasionally, I would catch a glimpse of another survivor, a pale face seeking out from some hiding spot. But Timmy and I kept pushing forward, looking for a way out. We were in a sprawling gymnasium, sitting down and resting for a few minutes when we encountered the warden. We heard a demonic roar from the hallway, mixing of many strange, inhuman tongues. As Timmy and I sat up quickly, a decapitated body flew into the gym, and a creature from hell followed after it. The body smacked into the concrete wall with a soft, fleshy whack. The warden stood 10 feet tall. He had on black correctional officer's uniform and a leather visor cap. His face looked like it had no flesh. A thick layer of bone covered it, with 2 reptilian eyes peering out from behind slitted pupils. He hissed, a forked tongue shooting out of his gaping maw. His fingers looked like sharp daggers of bone. A smell like old leather and blood rose from his body, shoot it, I screamed, raising the pistol and firing at his head. The first shot blew off his visor cap, revealing the hairless reptilian skull underneath, but the bullet only gouged the top of its skull. It ran at us, with powerful bounding steps covering the distance in moments. Timmy and I fired as fast as we could as it got within a few feet of us. It bounded into Timmy like a freight train hitting a car. Timmy's body went flying and smashed against the back wall with a sound of bones shattering. I slammed another magazine in the pistol as the warden turned to me. We had hit it. I saw one of his eyes had exploded in a shower of gore and vitreous fluid. Its head was bleeding badly. I raised the gun, aiming for the same eye and firing. The warden smacked his hand against his face, and as if he had forgotten something, falling to the floor. I ran forward, putting the pistol point blank against his ruined eye, before emptying the clip. By the end, he wasn't moving anymore. "Oh, God," I said, walking over to Timmy. I saw his shattered legs, his broken spine, and his snapped ribs. He coughed up blood. "I'm sorry, Timmy, I really am." His head might have nodded slightly as he died, giving a final gasp before falling still. I found a ring of keys on the warden's body. In excitement, I ran downstairs and tried the locked door. It worked. I went to the van, pulling out the dead driver and starting it. After smashing through the garage door, I drove through the gate. It did catastrophic damage to the prison van, but it got me far enough away before the engine gave out. I don't know what kind of prison that was, but I hope I never see the hellscape again. That's the end of that story. I hope you enjoyed it. I'm going to read one more story. This is called "The Elevator Door Opened to Reveal a Wall with a Small Opening in the Center. I had no other choice but to enter it." I entered the elevator alone, exhausted and ready to go home. After spending the past hours doing overtime to finish all my paperwork, I wanted nothing more than to plop on my bed and rest. My trip home was supposed to be uneventful, just like any other night. However, as I stood there in the elevator and watched the numbers on the display go down, I was surprised to see it go past the ground floor and continue its descent. Initially, I wasn't too concerned. It was just a minor inconvenience. At least that's what I thought at first. Being in a faulty elevator was not good, but I thought the worst that could happen was for it to head to the basement floor. In that event, all I had to do was get off and take the stairs up, because I sure wasn't going to stick around a broken elevator. But when I saw the numbers on the display continuing to go down, rocket past the basement and reach negative numbers, I gradually realized that something was terribly wrong. Staring at the display with wide eyes, I felt shock and fear mixed within me. I then began to wonder if it was some kind of computer glitch. It seemed like the logical reason, because I was sure that the elevators were not meant to display negative numbers. But it couldn't be just a glitch. I could feel the elevator continue its descent, going down and down to floors it didn't even know existed in the building. I wondered how this was even possible. Was the basement floor supposed to be the last one? Were there other floors that weren't listed here? This worried me a lot, and I could feel the panic within me rise. Where was it going? How was this even possible? These thoughts bombarded my mind as I watched the display tell me that I was in the negative 88th floor. Scared, I pressed the emergency button, but to no avail. It remained silent, giving no alarm to the current situation I was in. Frustrated, I pushed it again once more. It gave no reaction. Realizing it was useless to try and make it work, I then decided to press the button for the emergency phone. That too failed. Instead of connecting me to someone who could help me, it just remained silent, almost mocking me as I stood there and continuously pressed it. Desperate, I then grabbed my phone, hoping to call a friend who might inform in building management about the predicament. However, I was stared at the device. I felt my heart drop when seeing that there was no signal. At that point, it dawned upon me that there was no device there that could help me contact the outside world. Left without any other option, I foolishly screamed for help, letting my voice echo in the elevator. I hoped that maybe my plea would be able to penetrate the depth and reach someone's ear. "Help," I shouted. "Please help me. I'm trapped in here." With each yell, I prayed that someone would hear me bring aid. But how would they? If the display was to be believed, then I was 2,000 floors underground. Who was to hear me that far down? I was too scared to think clearly, so I continued to scream. In the end, all I was able to do was exhaust myself and further lower my spirits. Slowly, I was starting to accept that I was trapped and alone in that elevator with no way of contacting anyone for help. With dread, I glanced at the elevator display to see that I was then at the negative 2,500th floor, looking on with a feeling of shock and defeat. I wondered how long would I continue to go down. The descent seemed to endlessly continue, and all I could do was watch on, frozen in horror, as the numbers passed by in front of me. Inside, I prayed, hoping for this nightmare to end, yet it continued ignoring my internal pleas. I could feel my head spin as the minutes went on, and I thought that any second I would fall and collapse from the overwhelming emotions raging within me. The fact that the elevator reached floors that have been deep underground frightened me. I wanted it to stop. Eventually it did stop. That did no little to calm my nerves. Glancing at the elevator display, I looked on with horror to see that it said that I was in the negative 3,000th floor. If that was true, that I would have to be deep within the Earth's crust, yet it didn't seem I was. This far underground, it should have felt hotter, but it didn't. Instead, it felt the same as when I first entered the elevator. It was cool and the air was easy to breathe. I then wondered if any of the laws of nature still applied to that elevator. Recovered from the initial fear that paralyzed me, I eventually turned my attention towards the doors. Instead of opening, they remained closed, leaving me trapped in there. However, remembering where I was, I wondered if I was better that they remained closed. If it opened, would I find some kind of room deep underground, or would tons of dirt and rock just enter a small space I was in and crush me to death? I was too scared to find out, so I made sure to not press anything on the control panel that would make it open. But what was I to do? Was I supposed to just wait there? Wait for what? Will the elevator go back up? Or will it suddenly go down again? How farther could it go if it did go down? Will something else happen? Or would I just remain trapped here until I die? Was this thing taking me to hell, or has it brought me here already? All of these questions raged in my head, yet there seemed to be no answer. Desperate and confused, I then tried to find meaning to why I was there. I needed to know why I was chosen. I needed to know the reason I was unlucky enough to be here. I thought that maybe if I find the answer to that, then I could also find the path to my escape. I felt like there was an answer somewhere, and I had to look for it. Yet I didn't know where I could possibly find it. After all, what was there to see inside a plain elevator? Looking around, I did my best to look for any sign or hint, but there was nothing. All I could see was stainless steel walls of the elevator and my frantic reflection. As the minutes went, I realized I would find nothing. I was just simply trapped there, with no means to get out. Feeling defeated, I then slumped on the wall and allowed myself to slide down till I was sitting on the floor. Then as I fell, a wave of sadness hit me. I buried my face in my hands and began to sob. Never in my life had I expected something like this to happen to me. How could anyone have predicted such a cruel thing to happen to them? I didn't know why I was there, or who chose me to be the victim of this. All I knew was that I was trapped here, wherever the elevator ended up at. The next few moments I remained like that, frightened and feeling sorry for myself. However, eventually my sorrow turned into frustration. I felt that I was cheated on by life and left abandoned. Deep inside, it felt like I won some kind of cosmic lottery and had been awarded with the prize of torment. Feeling the frustration overcome me, I ended up clenching my fist before looking up at the ceiling. As I stared up, I wondered if there was someone out there looking down at me, as if the unknown being that had allowed me to be in this situation was watching me like I was a rat in an experiment. Thinking that furthered the frustration in me as I gazed with a foul expression. Unable to keep in my anger any longer, I suddenly let out a curse, screaming to the top of my lungs. The frustration was too much, and it soon turned into full-blown anger. "Fuck," I shouted as I felt my blood boil. "Fuck, fuck, fuck." Allowing the anger to get the best of me, I started to lose control and began throwing a fit in the elevator. My anger was mainly directed at the entity, or the trick of faith, that had allowed me to be trapped here. Out of all the people in the world, they chose me. I wanted them to know that I was displeased by their decision. "Fuck you," I yelled. "Fuck you. Let me out of here. I don't deserve this. Bring me back up." Of course, I was met with no reply. No one responded or gave a hint that I was being heard. I was only met with silence as the elevator remained unmoving. This only served to anger me even more as I began stomping my feet on the floor, making the elevator shake as I increased the force. "Let me out. Fucking bring me back," I cried. Feeling my rage continue to rise, I soon began banging on the walls until all that could be heard was the sound of metal being struck in that confined space. At that moment, I was blinded by emotions. I was scared and I was angry. I no longer cared where the elevator could be. All caution was gone by that point. I no longer cared that it could be deep underground and that my actions could cause the doors to open and allow them to bury me. I no longer cared and simply allowed my emotions to act for me. Banging on the walls, kicking the doors, and shouting, I went wild in there. At one point, I began slamming my hands on the control panel, hitting multiple buttons as I did so. While most of the buttons I bumped did nothing to change my situation, the door open button somehow did. The moment my fist pressed it, the elevator doors made a screeching sound, making me pause and step back. Turning my attention to the door, I watched with surprise and apprehension as it slowly parted and opened. However, instead of a mountain of dirt and rock pouring in, what I saw confused me. As my anger subsided, I backed away, stared at what the door revealed. Right there in front of me was a rough concrete wall with a small rectangular opening at its center. Relieved that I wasn't going to be buried to death, but still cautious at the strange sight in front of me, I kept a distance and stayed at one corner of the elevator, keeping my eyes intently at the small opening. I did my best to prepare myself for anything that might happen. I feared that at any moment something would come crawling out of the opening. I was terrified as I stood there. I knew that if something did come out, I wondered what I was supposed to do. I had nothing to fight with aside from my fist. If something did come out, I would be helpless against it. However, as luck would have it, nothing emerged from the opening. As the second turned into minutes, it soon became clear that nothing was going to happen, at least nothing immediately. Allowing myself to relax for a moment, I ended up lost in thought as I wondered what to do with the new situation presented to me. As I studied the opening from a distance, I couldn't help but entertain the idea that it may be the key to my escape. If anything else, it was at least a path that might lead to any other place than the elevator. From my initial observations, it was obvious that I could squeeze myself into the opening and crawl into the tunnel it led to. It would have been a tight fit, and I never was a fan of small spaces, but in that desperate moment I was willing to do it. But the question then was, where would it lead to? I hoped that it would lead back to the surface, but after the distance I've traveled in the elevator, I realized that if it did, then I would be a long journey. I then wondered how I would be able to survive such a trip without any supplies. After a short debate, I eventually convinced myself that the risk of a long journey without supplies had a better chance of success than staying in the elevator and dying from starvation and dehydration. Besides, I hoped for the possibility that the tunnel would lead me to another room, one that would perhaps provide me with either food and water or a quicker way back to the surface. After all that I had been through that day, such a possibility didn't seem too far-fetched to me at the time. It was worth the risk. Moving closer to the opening and trying to peer into it, I tried my best to see how far into the tunnel I could see. The light from the elevator only illuminated a few foot from the opening. After that, it was pure pitch-black darkness. Taking out my phone, I then opened its flashlight and tried to shine it into the tunnel. That helped light up a few more feet but after that, the void of darkness hid anything else further. Sighing, I took a deep breath and tried to gather all the courage within me. This was my only chance, and I knew I had to take it. Checking my phone, I saw that it still had more than 50% of power left. I hoped that would be enough to provide until I reached another room or wherever this tunnel led to. With some hesitation, I lifted myself into the entrance, and after a brief struggle to get my whole body in, began crawling forward. Since it was impossible to hold the phone pointing forward as I crawled inside the cramped tunnel, I decided to keep it held in one hand with the flashlight on. That way I was able to somewhat illuminate the surrounding area and see what was directly in front of me. Despite this, I began to feel some panic as I moved through the cold, concrete, small passageway. Crawling inside a narrow tunnel wasn't exactly something I was comfortable doing, especially when I didn't know where exactly it would lead me. Looking forward and trying my best to see what was ahead, I could feel a sense of dread in my stomach at seeing nothing but darkness ahead of me. It seemed that having the flashlight on was no better than having it off, since I couldn't illuminate far enough to allow better navigation. However, the moment I turned off the flashlight to try and save battery power, I quickly realized that the sensation of being in complete darkness while inside a confined space made things much more difficult. In the complex dark, I felt vulnerable, more vulnerable than I already was. It's hard to describe the uncomfortable feeling I felt in that moment of darkness, but it felt strange. For some reason, it seemed that the moment the light was gone, I sensed the feeling that someone was watching me. The thought of that brought a chill down my spine as I desperately looked around in the dark. This sensation of being watched grew with every second passed, and eventually made me stop and turn the flashlight on again. Looking ahead of me, and with some difficulty looking behind me, I saw that there was no one there, yet I was certain that I was being watched earlier. Bothered by this, I felt that urge to turn back, but I fought it and decided to continue. My only salvation was forward, and told myself that I couldn't give up. With one last glance at my surroundings, I turned off the flashlight and moved forward. The moment the darkness engulfed me, the feeling of being watched returned. However, I knew that I had to ignore it and do my best to fight the urge to turn on the light again. In the end, I managed to convince myself that I had to conserve power for more important situations, so I went crawling in the narrow tunnel in total darkness. Following the tunnel, I took a couple of turns every now and then as it led me deeper and deeper, determined to reach its end. I kept on going, ignoring all thoughts of turning back. After a while, my body was getting tired. I had been crawling through the tunnel for more than half an hour by then, and my muscles were starting to ache. There was nothing more I wanted than to be able to get up and stretch my whole body. But in the tight confines of that passageway, all I could do was occasionally extend my arms and feet once in a while. As it would turn out, I soon ended up finding a room at that point. Initially, due to the constant darkness, I didn't know what was approaching and into the tunnel. It was only when I put my hand forward and felt no concrete ahead of me did I realize that I finally encountered an opening that led to a larger space. Turning on the flashlight to better see what I found, I was surprised to see a fairly large room big enough for me to stand in, but it wasn't the size of the room that attracted my attention. Instead, it was the room that was made of that drew my interest. The walls, the ceiling, and the floor were not made of concrete. They weren't made of wood, steel, or any common material. Instead, they were made out of fleshy-like material, not too far off from human skin, with their follicles protruding out of them. Seeing this unnerved me, but I couldn't keep my eyes off of it. Shocked and transfixed, I stared at each corner of the room and soon noticed it was expanding and contracting with each second as if it was breathing. It made me wonder if the room was alive. The sight of such large walls and flesh breathing was strange and frightening. It wasn't natural and shouldn't exist. The thought of such a thing existing made me wonder what else I would find in here. For a moment I contemplated what to do. I wasn't sure if this room was safe, especially since it was clearly alive. I didn't want to go into it and explore. However, no sooner after thinking that, I noticed that there was something on the other side of the room, shining my light there. I couldn't help but feel excitement suddenly hit me as I realized that there was another opening there. This thus left me with no other option than to get on the room, quickly cross it and get into that tunnel. Luckily for me, the distance to the other opening was only around 10 feet away. Not trusting the room, I decided that I was going to make a quick sprint to the other side and get in the other tunnel as fast as I could. There was no telling what the room did the moment I stepped into it, but I wasn't willing to stick around enough to experience the consequences. Due to the narrowness of the tunnel, I found it impossible to maneuver myself. Because of that, I went into the room head first, with my arms shielding my head as I crawled out and fell down the floor. As I landed, I felt my body hit a good number of protruding hair follicles. This seemed to cause the room to react. I suddenly felt everything around me shake. Getting up, I looked around and saw that the walls were expanding and contracting faster than they were before. At that moment, I was tempted to pull myself back up and back into the tunnel I had just left. I managed to control myself long enough to realize that to go back would result in my being trapped there forever. There was no more place to go in that tunnel, and I would just end up back in the elevator. My only salvation now was in the tunnel on the other side of the room. Moving towards the other side, I felt the shaking around me intensify as I went. Allowing myself to look around the room, I saw with great horror that the walls and ceiling were expanding and closing on me. This encouraged me to go even faster, and as soon as I reached the wall where the opening was, placing my phone in first so that I would provide me with light, I then lifted myself up and got in the tunnel. Doing my best to glance behind me once I was inside, I managed to see the walls expand more and more until I could no longer see the room from the opening. All that was left was a wall of flesh that blocked the entrance. Letting out a deep sigh of relief, I allowed myself to relax for a second. Turning off the flashlight, I then lay flat on the cold concrete floor of the tunnel and got a few moments of rest. The adrenaline was now fading away from me, and I felt more exhausted than I was earlier. After a while, I decided that I had enough rest and willed my sore body to continue the monotonous task of crawling under. Many minutes of eventful crawling occurred before I encountered my next problem. As I moved along the tunnel, I eventually bumped into a wall in front of me. At first, I feared that I may have reached a dead end, and that all my traveling was for nothing. After feeling around, I soon noticed that there was no wall to my left and right. Turning my phone's flashlight, I soon saw that I had actually found a split in the tunnel. Further inspection of the paths on both sides revealed that each path had multiple tunnel openings throughout their length. This thus left me with a decision to make. Which path should I take? Deciding to rest as I contemplated what to do, I couldn't help but let my thoughts wander as I laid there on the cold tunnel floor. I didn't seem to be getting any closer to freedom, and further I went, the worse my situation seemed to become. Dejected but left with no other option, I decided to continue. I'd gotten that far already, after all. There was no use stopping now. Choosing to take the path on the right, I moved forward until I got to the sixth tunnel opening. And hoping that I made the right decision, I pushed on, continuing my earlier routine of moving through the tunnel in the darkness. While crawling, I slowly noticed that the tunnel was beginning to slope up. This sent a wave of excitement to me. The entire time I have been there, the tunnel always remained flat, but now it was going up. I hoped that it meant that I chose right and finally going back to the surface. As I pushed forward, emboldened by the good news, I soon felt that the angle of the slope seemed to increase the further I go. At first, this didn't worry me, but as the angle kept on rising, I soon found it difficult to crawl. Eventually, it reached to the point that my movement was extremely slow, as I had to fight against gravity to prevent myself from sliding down. To my great relief, I soon reached an area where the slope ended and the tunnel once more perfectly flat. Now I took a brief rest and allowed myself to breathe before continuing. However, I was only able to move a couple of feet before stopping again. Looking ahead, I saw a faint light in the distance. Unsure what this could mean, I hesitated as I crawled forward. Slowly making my way to the light, I soon saw the outline of an opening in front of me. Immediately I knew what it meant. There must have been another room. Remembering what I found in the last room, I was a bit hesitant at the idea of entering another one. It didn't help that this room was emitting some light, something that was uncommon in these tunnels. I then wondered what could be causing the light and as if it was a good thing. Because of my fears, I moved towards the opening, cautiously before stopping and peering out to see what was in there. As I took my first glance, I felt my body freeze in fear. There, sitting in the center of the large room, was a gigantic monster with a large, bulbous body that had dozens of eyes, facing every direction. Connected on the lower half of this monster were hundreds of tentacles of various sizes that moved and shifted constantly as if they were restless. Looking at this terrible being and wondering what such a thing was doing there, I allowed my eyes to wander around the room to see what was illuminating it. To my surprise, I saw hundreds of monitors lining the walls, each one depicting some kind of video. Briefly looking back to the monster before turning my attention back to the monitors, I soon realized that my eyes were watching these monitors. Focusing on one of the monitors, I showed footage of a man sitting behind a study table, watching for a few seconds. I saw that the man was staring at his laptop and typing intently on something on it. Confused, I then looked at another monitor to see that it showed a woman lying in bed, sleeping. Turning my gaze to another monitor, I then saw footage of another man as he sat and used his phone. As I glanced at each screen, all I could see were people doing random tasks, people living their lives, people who didn't seem to know what they were being watched. Laying there amazed and frightened, I couldn't help but wonder if that thing was just there to spy on people. It would seem so, and I wondered how many people it had eavesdropped on and for how long it had been doing this. The thought of something as horrendous as that monster watching me without my knowledge sent a shiver down my spine. As I kept on studying the monitors, my eyes suddenly focused on one in particular. Looking on with horror, I saw myself displayed there, lying on the tunnel with a shocked expression on my face. I stared with eyes to see the same look be reflected on the monitor. I didn't know how it was possible, but it was there. Realizing that this meant that the monster would know where I was, I started crawling backwards and away from the opening. I knew I needed to get away before it noticed I was there. There was no telling what it would do if it saw me there close to its lair, and I did not want to find out. Unfortunately for me, before I could move far enough, one of the monster's smaller tentacles entered the tunnel and moved towards me. Desperately, I tried to move back faster, but I was able to wrap around my arm and pull me out of the tunnel. Screaming and feeling complete fear overtake me, I tried to resist, but I couldn't. Its grip on me was too strong, and I was lifted into the room and towards the many eyes of the huge creature. Hanging by the arm as I stared at it, my whole body shook in fright. I could see many of its eyes focused on me with their gaze, feeling like sharp daggers. I didn't know what it wanted from me or what its intentions were with me. At the time, I assumed that whatever they were, they couldn't be good for me. That's why I was caught by surprise when the creature gently placed me down on the floor. Afraid and confused, I dared not move and instead stood there and stared. Staring up at the monster, I watched as it lifted one of its larger tentacles. Fearing the worst, I closed my eyes thinking that this was going to slam against me. But nothing came. Daring to open my eyes, I looked back up at the monster to see that it held the tentacle out, extended toward the side of the room. Following its tentacle, I soon noticed that it was pointing towards a tunnel opening on the other side of the room. Staring back at it, I saw a couple of its eyes look at me, before glancing towards the opening. Hesitantly, I moved towards where it was pointing, wondering if this was some sort of trick. I was afraid that it would suddenly attack me once my guard was down. Then I thought, why would it? It was clearly stronger than me and could easily crush me without any effort. It didn't need me to lower my guard. So what did it mean? Was it playing with me, giving me a false sense of hope? Did it like to toy with its victims? Unsure and desperate to get out of there, I gave up on finding answers and soon started running towards the new tunnel opening. Moving as quickly as I could, I was soon standing by the entrance. Daring to look back, I turned my head towards the monster and saw that it remained there where it was, although many of its eyes were staring at me. Then, to my shock, I saw teeth appear. Sharp, huge, and white, its teeth revealed themselves to me as it did its best to form a smile. Seeing this made my heart drop, and I couldn't tell if it was a friendly gesture or a threatening one. Shaken by what I saw, I quickly entered the tunnel and began crawling forward as I could. For a moment, I considered why the creature pointed me here. Was it a trap? Will this tunnel lead me to my death? I wasn't sure, but I kept on going. During that time, anywhere seemed better than staying in that room with that monster. I kept on going for a few more minutes, only taking short breaks to catch my breath before moving on again. During these breaks, I would check my phone, trying to see if I was getting any signal, but there was none. So I just continued to crawl. By that point, I was completely exhausted, both physically and emotionally. This whole journey had taken its toll on me, and all I wanted was for it to end. Eventually, I began to see a light in the distance once more, this time brighter than the earlier one. Cautiously, I began moving forward, wondering what kind of room I would encounter now. However, as I got closer, I felt a fresh breeze brush my face. This surprised me, then getting closer, I heard the sound of birds chirping. Feeling excitement rushed through me, I wondered if I really reached the end of, or if this was just some kind of cruel trick these tunnels were playing on me. To my relief, it was the former. Reaching the opening, I was momentarily blinded by the brightness I saw outside. I had to close my eyes for a moment before blinking a couple of times, as my vision adjusted to the light. After spending so much time in the dark, seeing sunlight felt different. Despite this, I had a wide smile on my face as I slid out of the tunnel and landed on soft grass. Grabbing the grass with my hands and burying my face in it, I cheered and laughed. I had escaped. Looking up, I saw the blue sky above me. For a moment, I was confused. Last time I checked my phone, it told me that it was still supposed to be night. So why was the sun out? The hours passed by since I last checked it. I couldn't be. At least I didn't feel like it. Eventually, ignoring this anomaly, I then got up and dusted myself off. Looking around to find out where I was, I suddenly frowned when I noticed that the tunnel I had exited from was gone. It seemed to have just disappeared as I stood in the middle of an empty field alone. Shaking my head and giving up trying to understand the tunnels, I then tried to find out where I was. Looking at the distance, I was happy to see that my city was just a few miles away. Smiling, I let out a smile of relief, knowing that I had escaped as I walked away from that field and tried to figure out a way back home. I made a pledge to myself to never take that elevator again. Well, my lovelies, that is my last story. I hope that you enjoyed it. And I'll see you next time.